welcome to our Planning Commission meeting tonight. I will go ahead and lead us in the pledge. God will stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We want to excuse Commissioner Mendenhall, Commissioner Warnick, and Commissioner Ernest, who couldn't be with us tonight. So we've got the three of us. That being said, our first agenda item is the approval of the minutes from our July 7th meeting. There are only two of us that were at that meeting. We need three to be able to vote on that. So I'm just going to ask that we go ahead and continue that for our next meeting. Do we need to make a motion to continue those?
I don't think so necessarily on that.
Okay. All right, our next agenda item is conditional use permit. This will be a public hearing. This is for a cell tower on 200 East.
Go ahead. Next slide, please, Mike. All right, so we're looking at a cell tower. It's an existing one. The request is mainly to add additional antennas on the existing mounts. So we're there just to the west of I-15, about 1500 north. They're on 200 East. Go ahead to the next picture. This is the tower here, existing structure, so it's just at the top. They're adding some antennas. I-1 zone, conditional use permit, hence this why it's here before you tonight.
Is there anything different than the other ones that we've approved in the last couple of planning commissions?
No.
No questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to address this conditional use permit? Seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing, and if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I will make a motion that we recommend the 200 East 2021 cell tower modification.
Got a motion?
Second it.
And a second. Do a roll call vote for each of these tonight. Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Carter?
Aye.
That passes.
Sorry, just for clarification on this one, you're the land use authority, so
No recommendation is approved. Great. Thank you. All right, next agenda item is a zone change. This is for Wasatch Pallet.
correct. And Wasatch Pallet. I don't see the applicant here tonight. It's not me that's causing that noise, but so this has gone through the DRC, and the recommendation is for approval. And their findings are listed there in your staff report. One is that it's consistent with the general plan designation, which is industrial. And we have 3 industrial zones that are consistent with that designation: light, medium, and heavy. And the biggest difference between them is the types of uses, mainly attributed to intensity of those uses that would place it in a different category. So for instance, if we go to well, let me take a step back. So we're looking there at 1000 North, just north of Hall Industrial Subdivision, west of I-15, west of PDM Steel. You can see Depot Road. I thought we had some pointers. Depot Road's there on the right side of your screen.
So this is where the old livestock auction
Yes.
over here on the left, right?
And if you've driven by there recently, they currently have their, oh, thank you. So if you've driven by recently, here paralleling Depot Road, they've got their rail spurs that are going in. So their current location is at the old sugar beet factory. And my understanding is that rail spur is scheduled to be closed, hence the relocation and the coordination with the city as far as possibly moving here. Let's go ahead to the next slide. This is just outlining the area that would be rezoned. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is their conceptual site, or this is the site plan. There are some conditions that were requested with the approval by the DRC. Some of them relate to access, but largely the proposed uses on the site, would remain unchanged. And so some of those, just to highlight it, on site they've got a vehicle repair for their trucks that they use to haul their product. We also have the warehousing, which would be this building here. We've got a large part of the site would be storage yard and lumber yard, and so you've got finished pallets, materials, different products that they offer, such as the wood chipping, or the wood chip, and then you can see a lot of their product would come in via rail, and so you've got some storage areas associated with that. Also have some office, which is here, and some light manufacturing that would take place inside. And so all of those are permitted uses in both the I-1, which it's currently zoned, and the I-2. The main difference when we compare use charts, lists, some of the things in the I-2 that would be allowed, for instance, with like a conditional use permit, would be self-storage units, concrete manufacturing, impound yard, and then other manufactured products. So the biggest difference, as it's been looked at with staff, hence the request by the applicant for the I-2, is just the sheer volume of activity that takes place outside. And so when we consider the I-1 zone, there's supposed to be no significant emission of noise, odors, things of that nature, whereas the I-2 zone does allow for you to consider moderate amounts of emissions of those kind. And so this has come before you. Hopefully I haven't force-fed you too much information, but if there's questions related to the site, Dave and I can try our best to answer them.
Got a question related to the current site.
Current site?
Current site, yeah, maybe you
hold
can
that
bring it up on the map, but you've got residential right in their backyard, right? Has the city received complaints from those residential neighbors of sound, of disturbance?
I think when they were first constructed, maybe.
That I'm aware, it's been several years since we've received complaints about noise. I think it's one particular piece of equipment that they've used at Wasatch Pallet, something that shreds unusable pallets and pallet parts and things like that. So you can imagine the kind of noise that that would make. And as best as I can remember, when we looked into that, we actually didn't find that Wasatch Pallet was violating the sound ordinance. So even though it was loud, for example, the traffic on I-15 was being picked up as being louder on the decibel readers and that type of a thing. But nonetheless, this is not the type of use that necessarily we want to see, you know, in this particular situation right next to, residential neighborhood like that. This is really the result of something that goes back to the sugar beet factory, which predated contemporary zoning, and this property here has been zoned industrial too for a really, really long time, and the neighborhood encroached on it. So it's a little different situation in that regard, but there certainly are some things about the site that, in my view, make it not light industrial, not, you know, like a modern business park and things like that, that, you know, would maybe make somebody wonder what's happening as part of an operation, because it's all enclosed, it's all obscured from sight, and that type of a thing. This operation will be, I think, distinct in that way. People will know exactly what's going on.
Does the city's noise ordinance change based on zoning districts? So going to an I-2 as compared to where it's at right here, are they allowed different regulations or rules according to this noise policy based on where they're located?
I believe it's what's adjacent to it is how that's regulated in the ordinance. If you don't mind, I'll double check that to make sure that I get it right. I'll pull that up real quick and
I'm just wondering
see.
if, because they're moving to another location that's not got residential right next to it, are they?
You're given more leeway then.
Exactly.
I think that is the
They're asking
case,
for
but
I-2, so they're asking to go to the same designation they are now.
Correct.
To have the same.
Yeah, they've I think been very clear in expressing that they anticipate their new site, albeit it's bigger, they're able to design it more to meet their needs than what the current site has been for them, where they've kind of evolved into the space that they have to work with there. So while it'll be different, their operation, what they do will be the same. So same
They're
equipment.
not expanding any capabilities, not bringing any new products online with this new facility?
They haven't expressed that in any conversations I've been a part of.
What's their reason for moving?
That's a great question, and I wondered how much maybe detail to go into on that. We expect that there's going to be an interchange at some point in time, roughly at Center Street and I-15, maybe first south, but someplace in that vicinity. And there are rail spurs there now that need to be removed, discontinued, abandoned, before an interchange can be constructed. That's what started this conversation. With the elimination of the rail spur, it becomes less efficient for people to operate the pallet factory at its current location, which got them looking at other locations, which led them to purchase the property that we're talking about tonight. With the city facilitating the project to construct the rail spur that's under construction at their new site now, using, at least in part, I think mostly it's UDOT funds that are being used to construct that rail spur, with the idea that it's cheaper for UDOT to do that work now, perhaps, than it would be when they're in preparation for building an interchange at Center Street and I-15.
Mike, we go to the new site.
On this map or the site plan?
This map. Thank you.
Where's our current city boundary? Is it the railroad? So everything south of the railroad is currently in Spanish Fork, north of the railroad is county.
For the most part, until you get further to the east, that's how I see it.
Have we heard anything from these neighbors at all?
Not about this. I know one of them is relocated recently. I think another is sold property for the meat processing facility that we talked about a few weeks ago and things like that. I don't want to speak for any of them, but.
We're the neighbors just.
And, yeah.
Right here, right?
So we will be hearing from you.
You want to call that area?
One more question. So do they have any, I noticed they have a retention pond there. That's just normal storm retention. They don't have any chemicals on their site they're treating this with. It would be a change of operations, what we're doing now. They kind of asked where you didn't know many changes, but that's just storm
That's
retention,
a good
right?
question. I have not heard anything to that effect, that they're like settling ponds or anything of that nature. There's nothing like that.
Are we going to require any, what fencing is going to be on the boundary of this?
So, yeah, sorry. I mean, as we kind of talked about a little bit in your work session before, these folks have proposed to use a type of wall to surround the outdoor part of their operation, that currently is not allowed by the ordinance. We would require a masonry wall. I think you could call that a masonry wall, but a different type of wall that we very explicitly describe. So right now, that's their only option, is to build a masonry wall that meets our current standard. We did talk about the idea that should the city change the standard, they would of course be able to follow that new standard going forward, including with the development that they'd be doing here.
Where would the wall, looking at the plan right there, can you show us where the wall would go?
Yeah, it would surround everything that we're seeing. They'd have some type of a gate here. And we've talked about, and I think the option remains theirs until they probably construct it. They don't know what they want to do with this part of the property that they also own. I think they are trying to make some decisions about that. Again, not to speak for them at all, but my takeaway from the conversation is that should they decide that they anticipate having this used at least partly for outdoor storage, when they construct the wall elsewhere, they may just go ahead and enclose a good part of that with the wall, or they could just bring the wall right down this part of their property line here to wherever the outdoor storage ends and outdoor storage operation part, anything outdoor, and that's what we would require.
Which may explain why they kind of request a wall that may be able to be moved.
I think particularly for that, yeah, that seems like it's attractive for them maybe.
So did I hear right earlier that they probably fall underneath I-1 already, but this is just, they are more specific to I-2?
I don't believe so. I think given that a really significant part, if not the majority of their operation happens outside, and where they actually are conducting processes and things like that outside, I think that alone is the trigger that makes it no longer light industrial and makes it the medium that we're talking about here.
What did we do across the street at the process?
Yeah, everything else in the area that we're aware of, but for some outdoor storage, will happen entirely within an enclosed building. Therefore, it all fits into the I-1 zone, as we've talked about. And there are a variety of different things that will be happening in the Hall subdivision to the south, different types of companies. And I would expect the same thing to happen to the east as well. But that's really the best way for me to describe where that line.
The Sunrock development that we did to the north, that would have been an I-2?
That would have been an I-2 and then some, I think. But rather than to go that route, we created a whole different zoning tool for them, which there probably would have been a lot of ways to address that. I'm pretty comfortable with how that was handled. But
So it's a shame that we don't have them here to speak for themselves, but are we sure that, I mean, how much of their application is going to be done outside? I'd like to know what those the activities done outside are. To know noise that's going to be caused, or dust or sawdust or whatever's going to be flying around.
Yeah, I mean,
How it's contained.
because when we talk about moving Sunrock, we actually did a field trip. We went out, we watched them crush, we listened to them.
And commissioners at the time had ideas of enclosing that whole facility,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
Be happy to go place a call.
It'd be interesting to go see and I'd love to talk to some neighbors that currently live there, or even know when their processing hours are and be able to walk around and see how far away you are, that you can still hear it, you know.
And if there's something being done now that's being done indoors that they're proposing to move outdoors, how would that impact the neighborhood or the area surrounding it?
I definitely think it's a better location than where they're at now with the residential,
Yeah.
for sure, but
But
yeah,
still
a
has
couple of
impact,
questions.
right? Still has impact on the residents they're going next to now. Who need to answer?
this is not an insignificant change, going from I-1 to I-2.
Right?
And in light of that, having an opportunity for the commission and anybody that attends a public hearing that might want to ask questions and that sort of thing for an applicant to address, I think that's an important part of the process. So should you want to continue this tonight, I think that,
Do you know what their timeline is? Obviously, they're already starting on the railroad, it sounds like.
I don't know. My guess is that they'll tell us that time is of the essence.
They always do.
But the only other thing that I'll say, and
We agree, so let's get it right.
Yeah.
Time is of the essence.
all that much more
Start
important,
over.
this is not happening without the city's facilitation. 100%, just to be as clear as I can be about that. Still, I don't take it necessarily as a foregone conclusion until the city council acts to change the zoning. I think there's something that will need to occur to be able to allow them to operate the way they have been on this site. But I'm surprised that they're not here. They had a pretty large contingent of people that attended the Development Review Committee meeting. And certainly if the commission wanted to have an opportunity maybe to take a look at their current operation, I suspect that we could arrange a tour or something like that before your September meeting for that. So certainly have, I think tonight, a lot of options.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Let's go ahead and move into public hearing. You just state your name and maybe where you live in comparison to the project.
My name's Lynn Oplenop, and we live, or we're moving just north of this property. And the industrial I-1, not an issue. We're just concerned about the noise and the dust. We have walked down around there and during operation hours, and there is notable sawdust, everything that blows. And along the trail, the city trails and stuff down there, there is noticeable dust and matter from the operation. So that's our biggest concern, is just the noise during operation hours, and if there's a way to mitigate the noise, the sound pollution and the dust. We don't have a big objection to anything besides that.
And you're directly north,
Yeah.
actually just directly north.
Right there, yeah, that part of it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see in comparison, because I think their operations, their outdoor is gonna be kind of, if I remember right, about right here.
Well, and that's what they said, the grinding and everything, so a south storm, like the big storms we get coming, would blow right into our
So you guys,
front yard.
you're currently living here?
Yes,
What's the wind, when it does blow, does it blow north, south, east,
well, the
west?
storms that come, like the big storm on the
Yeah.
22nd or whenever for the 24th, it blew right through there. It would have been right
So
our
from the south
direction,
to the
for the
north.
south to the north. Now, a morning wind, we know it comes from the east to the west, so not a concern. But the big ones, that's what we'd worry about, is just debris and sawdust. And so
Okay, so-
some plan to mitigate that.
So sound and debris are your
Sound and
concerns
debris.
as neighbors?
Yep. Yeah, and then the corner, I just noticed the corner, that angle down where you go into 1000 North and Depot Road, it's kind of an angle. And if we have the fence all the way to the road, you're gonna have a hard time seeing back to the west. So that's a concern also.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So, my name's Adam Hall, and I currently live like right next door to the facility. And just to kind of put your mind at ease, it hasn't bothered us much. And actually smells nice. Honestly, I mean, the smell of the
noticed
pine.
the smell, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the smell of the pines has been great, so, but anyway, just for what it's worth.
How long have you lived there?
16 years,
16.
yeah. Yeah.
How close would you say you are to the facility?
So,
There's a
facility's right there on 1400. I live on 1170, so
So you're down here?
yeah, so yep, right there, and then spend a lot of time over on the walking path and stuff around there. So yep, there. And when I first moved in there wasn't anything between me and the pallet factory for several years before the rest of that was built out. Anyway.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. Any thoughts, discussion? What do you guys think?
My thoughts are, I'd like to have a chance to talk to the applicant and find out more about their proposed plans of production, and what activities they have planned to be outside, and if there's any changes, and just understand that better. And I think it's a shame that if this is important and time is of the essence, they should have been here tonight.
Is there a possibility we could set up a field trip?
Certainly a possibility, we can ask, yeah, definitely.
I would say the same. I think that there's too many unknowns of the change and what it's going to bring, or how activities will change from their current site to their new site, and making sure that we're making the right decisions. I think they should be here to answer some of those questions.
If all things are similar to what they're doing now,
Yeah.
personally, I'm fine. Just would like to know, I don't want to just go to the council without doing a little bit of due diligence to make sure those questions have been covered, so that everybody knows there's not some new operation, a grinder that's gonna go in there that's gonna be louder than what they currently
What they're
do.
doing? Right. Okay, either of you want to make a motion on that?
What's the motion, just to continue?
Continue it?
I'd like to make a motion that we continue the, what is the title of this?
Wasatch Pallet
So
Zone.
Wasatch Pallet zoning, until our next meeting, or until the commission has a chance to tour the facility.
I'd second that.
Second. Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
I guess you made the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that one continues. Let's see, next agenda item is Slim Chickens. This is a proposed zone change from R16 to C2 on 990 North, 400 East.
Thank you. Do we have Slim Chickens here tonight? Oh, man. We do have some applicants here, so apparently half of our emails work, but we'll do our best to present this item and then try to answer any questions you may have, and if there's some that you feel would be appropriate to ask the developer, we'll go to that point. So this is the area highlighted, 1000 North, 400 East, just directly east of Quick Quack and to the west of Discount Tire there along 1000 North. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide, Mike. Oh, I thought we had a third one. Let's go back a slide. Actually, let's pull up the interactive map and pull up the zoning. Yeah, so currently it is a residential zone. There's 2 homes that front 1000 North, or excuse me, one that fronts 400 East, but there's 2 along 1000 North, and then you can see there's a third parcel that's included in the proposal. This parcel here. Yep, that's the highlighted area. So currently the general plan is mixed use, so we anticipate something a little different than what is currently there on the property as far as future land use planning goes. It's currently zoned the R16. The request is changing it to a C2. If we can go back to the zoning, you can see the C2 to the east, to the west, and to the north. And then also with that request, they're looking to apply the development enhancement overlay. And what that does is give the city council the ability to relax certain requirements as it relates to parking or landscaping or things of that nature, if they can show there's an offset as far as why the request is being made. And we can kind of touch briefly on what it is they're proposing. So this did go before the DRC. DRC recommendation to you is there in the staff report. They recommended approval based on the findings in the report, that it's consistent with our general plan designation, and that they found it was consistent and conforms with the findings that we have in the development enhancement overlay. And in your staff report, there should have been a section of code that kind of outlines the purpose and intent of that overlay. They did have some conditions, mainly just dealing with red lines as far as the site plan approval goes. So we'll go ahead and jump into the reason. So I hope that it's apparent as to why they're requesting the C2 portion, but then let's jump to the landscape plan, and I'll just highlight why they're requesting the development enhancement overlay. So generally when we have a commercial use that borders a residential use, so to the south there's the duplex, we would require at least 10 feet of landscaping, masonry wall, and then trees every 30 feet on center, as well as other plantings underneath it. And so one of the requests that they're looking for, they're required by staff to do a shared access here. So in the future, as properties further south redevelop, the idea is that we'd have a mid-block access that they would share. And so that, hence the reason for no landscaping here. The wall would pick up about 20 or 15 feet back, excuse me, for clear view. And then we see it increase. We've got a transformer here, and then it'd be 5 feet. And they'd be doing the wall, but then they've grouped the tree spacing closer together. I want to say it was either 18 or 20. I can't remember off the top of my head. So it helped kind of take it above the masonry wall and provide more of a screening for the enjoyment of the property to the south. The reason for that is mainly related to parking. And that's kind of twofold. One, where the curb line is now that you see, that's not going to remain. So they'd be giving up right away on this side for an additional turn lane, and they'd be giving up right away on 1000 North to widen the existing lane, and then also they'd be providing for this turn pocket. And so they would be sharing a drive approach with Discount Tire, so that would be widened and it would be brought into their site. And so since they would have absolutely no ability to have any off-street parking, they really did their best to try and accommodate as much parking on site as they could. The second area that they're asking for the reduction is specifically related to that increase in the lane travel width. And so generally we'd have a standard cross section where, say, you might have an 8-foot planter or a 5-foot sidewalk. Here we've got the standard sidewalk, but then because of the turn radius and then also the turning lane, they would not meet the standard cross section. And so those are the areas that the city council is being tasked specifically to look at and just identify that it does justify using that development enhancement overlay. Other than that, let's jump to
Just a second
detention
about that.
basin here.
So they're not widening 1000 at all, they're just adding a decel lane for that right-hand turn into their.
They would be widening it, how many
So
feet,
that black
Mike?
line right there is the existing curb. They've been moving it back 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah,
The idea is that there's a median all the way to US 6.
Mhm.
So if you get in going this west direction, there's no way to flip around until you get right here. So we find a lot of vehicles,
Can't make it.
especially ones that can't make it, love to U-turn. And right now, they definitely can't make it.
Right.
So I've been there personally when trucks have backed up into the intersection.
Yeah.
So we had them do auto turn with that left-hand turn and move the curb back the distance needed so you can accommodate that U-turn.
Okay,
With
so they
the
are-
F-150.
It is enlarging the.
Yeah, so all the curb gutter sidewalk you see out there today will be gone, and you'll have like, I think it's a 12-foot lane and then a 16-foot lane, I can't remember exactly, something like that. And then you'd start your curb and gutter.
okay.
That was a really big deal, and then also right now you have combined through right here is what's there today. So they'd be adding a full right turn lane here. And then there'd be enough room to get on, and then there would be a decel to the shared access. We've had a consultant look at it and check it off and say this is a really good fix for the issues we have today out there.
So one thing that they also did try to do in accord or consistent with this decel lane is they did the dual stacking to try and get as many cars in the actual lane so it doesn't back out onto 1000 North, because that would defeat the whole purpose of some of these improvements.
We also worked out an agreement with Discount Tire to utilize the existing entrance here, which is mostly on Discount Tire property, so that was a big win to have those two work together, rather than having two separate accesses, which is pretty dangerous.
So where's the exit on this side? So if a car wants to come out and get to 1000 from right
It's
here,
just off the screen. If we go to
it's
the,
on the same side.
yeah, if we go to the interactive map,
Just the current.
it's right here.
Big Street has Discount Tire yet.
Doesn't exist yet. Yeah, so you can see their stop bar right here. That's their exit.
Is there a median or cement between the entrance and exit, or, because I saw the lines there, but is it just open like that?
It'll stay open like it is,
Yeah.
yeah.
They'll just add a tiny bit on this side here, and they'll tear out, so the wall that's there, I believe they'd tear it out until about the parking stalls, if I remember right.
Yeah, somewhere right here.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'd be torn out right here down to the parking stalls. And then they've got their detention here, Discount has theirs here. We tried to get them to coordinate, but I think cost was a factor as far as not
So
fully opening up the
this
cross
is their
access to the site.
Pond, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So it's
then-
like taking
Slim Chickens is proposing their basin here.
it. Okay.
And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea of the elevations for the building. This would be facing 4th East. And, oh heavens, this is facing south. Here's your north elevation. And this would be facing into the site towards Discount Tire. Thanks. This is a stock photo. Very similar. Any questions for staff?
Maybe after the public hearing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, let's move into public hearing for this zone change. Come up and state your name and.
If you don't know my name. I'm John Terrell. I'm the one that has all the signs down that road. I had an opportunity to meet with Mike this afternoon. And Mike, do you have that one picture that doesn't have any of that green stuff on it? That you can show me the one that on. Maybe first thing is go back to the one where that shows the actual flyover look on that intersection on 8th North and on 10th North and 4th East. Great. Okay, you'll notice that across the road where Costco's at, you'll see right there how wide that street is compared to 4th East. Okay? Now, I went in with guns loaded to talk to Mike today, and then he kind of cooled my jets a little bit because we're having real congestion issues down 4th East to 8th North. Congestion really bad there, and speed down 8th North. And that's something you're going to see further down the road. I think we talked about maybe having something ready to go to bring to the council on February, to talk to them about that. But put up the other one now that we had. This will show you what they're projecting to do in order to help us out there. You see on the other side where you got the turning lanes? There you go. Okay.
It's a little bigger now, but this is one I can pull up really quick. Bigger meaning there's
Yeah,
more.
okay. I guess the person that has, or either the city or the people that bought the lots have authorized them to go ahead and takes a certain portion of that partial and widen that street right there so that when they come down, they didn't have any way of being able to come out of their location, which is down at the bottom, and make a left-hand turn because of how narrow that road is. And it also makes it so that, like on the other side, they actually have a lane that can go straight up into the Costco, as well as making a turn lane. Right now, you don't have that. And also the turn lane to go east. So if they can follow through on that, I don't have any objections to the business. As far as chicken goes, that's all we need is another chicken place. But still, I think this would make it really good. And I think if we could eventually pull that width down further down for another block, that would take care of a lot of the problems on 8th North. But right now it's so narrow down there, and there are reasons, and I've kind of explained to Kevin what those reasons have been, but since then I've been taking a look at it, and there is a way we can widen that 4th East road on down to 10th North, on down to 8th North, and be able to get the traffic to flow better. Because right now you narrow down to one lane on each side of that road that creates a real congestion factor right there. And but I think what they've done here is just great. I was concerned whether or not they would be able to get the property in order to make that adjustment, and that would make it that side of the intersection the same as the one on Costco side, probably pretty close to the same width. Am I correct?
Yeah. For the intersection, yes, it'd be match, the lines will match up.
And it would match it up pretty good so that we can keep the flow of traffic a little easier there. But if we can get another lane going down there on, even if we got a second lane heading south, it would help. We don't get near the congestion going north on 4th East as we do going on south on 4th East. Because nobody likes to go down US 6. Nobody likes to go down Main Street. So the only other option to go through town is on 4th East right now, which we're discussing some alternatives to that. But we need to start taking a good hard look on how traffic flows in this area, especially if you guys keep building businesses down there. So it's that's the only complaint I've had. And before I got in to see Mike today, he already had it solved pretty much. But I wanted to let you guys know that I think they're doing a good job in realizing what needs to be done. And I guess Rome isn't built in a day. So maybe we can get the rest of it put together in the next 6 months or so. All right, thanks, guys.
John. Thank you, John. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. Mike, maybe you can talk about the roads a little bit. One of the large complaints that we hear in the city is congestion on Main Street, and especially right there in front of Cal Ranch. People trying to either get on the freeway or get on 1000 North to come to Macy's or Costco.
I'll give you the really brief version for the sake of everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is what I drew for John earlier today. So in Spanish, you got Center Street, you got, here it is, 4th North, a little jogging there, there's 4th, and you have 8th, right? So you have pretty good east-west, right? But all your north-south is right here. Right, you have US 6, but it's on a diagonal. You have Highway 15, which is on diagonal. But within town, you have short bursts of stuff. 11th East has some, 8th East, but none of them are continuous to really the main hub of commercial, right? Does anyone know what the widest street is in town besides Main Street and Center Street?
4th.
Third is, I think, within 5 feet the width of Main Street. And 3rd, ironically enough, goes from Scenic Drive, which captures a large area, and it goes, and then somewhere someone didn't quite capture, and they put the skinniest road in town at the end of the largest road in town some decades ago, which is where my red pointer ends. So you can see we're so close. The hard part is we already have a signal here at the corner of Macy's. Sorry, let me finish my line here. You have a signal here at Macy's, you have a signal here at Quick Quack. They're too close to the time, like timing wouldn't work if you put one in between. And there's 20-ish houses / townhomes you'd have to buy. So our thought is, well, 4th East is right now where John lives and a couple other folks I'm sure you've probably heard from. It is narrow, but it is a direct shot to that signal where Slim Chickens is going. So that is now the beloved Costco Highway, I think is what it's been called. So to encourage that not to be used quite as much, and let's have 3rd be something we can use more. The idea, again, this is just thinking, well, what if you have to make it preferred, right? So sorry with my lines here. You'd have to do some signal work. Sorry, some are bigger than others. Oh, come on. Anyway, the idea is, why don't we make 3rd East a preferred route? Maybe something you can put a signal or something on that parallels Main Street. Not that you'd make it, 5 lanes or anything today, but I think you could do 3 lanes and still fit pickleball courts on either side of it, along the shoulders if you wanted to. That's how big it is.
So you do that and you get rid of the yield signs.
Yield
And
signs,
change
stop
the
signs. You could talk about some speed limits. There's just some things you could do. Obviously, there's expense for the signals, but overall, I mean, the city, the residents pay to maintain that 85-foot wide road, and there's barely any traffic on it. Maybe there's some use that we could do there. And then once you get to the T where that mini road is, you could say go, oh, come on, somebody gonna draw for me.
Basically, you go right, you could go up into Costco at Fourth East.
So right to Costco, left to Macy's.
Go Macy's up Second East, so it kind of splits your traffic right there.
So you still put an intersection right there at the very end.
Can you zoom into that end?
Yeah. Oh, now it's nice and traffic.
Is the plan there a signal mic at the end or something?
So, again, we've sent to a consultant to help us analyze. This is very preliminary. It's just us, again, with John, just what options do we have? So the idea is at Fourth East, we put the signal, but you want to make Fourth East not the preferred highway, so maybe Third East has a higher speed limit. You know, maybe there's some things there, but, so this would probably be
It'd be wide enough for
a roundabout and then a signal here at Fourth East. You can't do two signals together. There's not a lot of room here on Fourth for a roundabout. So maybe there's a signal here, roundabout here, and then you can go here, which goes to a signal, take out that stop sign, or here, and then go north. I think that stop sign's gone now, but you can come up to the signal here. So split traffic at this point. And then this would go, if you lived in Wolf Hollow or Scenic Drive, you'd have 3 lights once you get out of this area from here all the way to your house. And you wouldn't be tempted to come down here to Main Street and head out. And then these side streets that lead over to Third could then be maybe a little more usable to get to something where they can go 35 or, you know. Again, this is preliminary thoughts, brainstorming, but that was our idea to utilize some roads we're maintaining now, just to use them for capacity on a north-south road. We really don't have an equivalent to besides Main Street. There's the Cliff Note version.
Thank you. That's
more
good
thoughts,
information. All right, back to the project at hand.
So my question, maybe for Brandon, whoever, is this, so this is their construction plans, are they gonna have 2 lanes here? How is that gonna work? Because my biggest concern when I see it is that backup onto this road, because this road can't handle any backup.
So once you pass, it'd be similar to Chick-fil-A if you've gone through their drive-through. So you've got 2 separate ordering options. Once you pass where you've ordered it, goes single file up to the pickup window, but everything behind that till this point would be double.
Are they as fast as Chick-fil-A?
Using Chick-fil-A as an example is probably not
That's-
great because
that's a high
that would
bar.
push it out into the street.
Probably not the demand.
All right,
but
let's
Chick-fil-A is pretty
say
fast.
McDonald's.
Okay.
So if we're
I
talking
haven't
about,
eaten here before, so I can't tell you how they.
if we're talking about feeding traffic down Third and then either splitting them to Second or Fourth, once you've put a development in and a building in, at that point, it's a little more difficult to make adjustments to roads. So wouldn't we want to try and make sure this road is as wide as we would ever want it to be at the time that we're putting business
Yeah,
in?
so at this point, you wouldn't have shoulders. When you drive out today, there's really no shoulder. You have a center lane for left-hand turns, and then the 2 through lanes. The mall doesn't pull out needing anything more. The only thing you would get additionally is, do you think we need right-hand turns? And really only need those at intersections. And you could say one here, we'd be buying some houses to make that happen.
Do we ever
So-
have issues with traffic trying to turn into Quick Quack?
Yeah, when it's a free car wash day, it goes
So,
back on the 1000 north.
so we could have probably used a right-hand turn there, right?
It
So there's a
really
right
has
hand
been
turn.
infrequent. Like literally after their, so I would probably say, I think we got it right on the west side of the road with what they dedicated there,
Yeah.
personally.
Because it doesn't happen often enough that it's an issue.
But what you're saying is, if we have development going on now, do we want to push that lane further south on Fourth?
That's my question. Does it make sense? Because you see some areas in town where we do have some traffic issues because of commercial use.
Well, across the street.
Exactly. And so does it make sense to try and get ahead of that?
We absolutely need to do that. we need to be cognizant that we're not going to get another bite at the apple on this. That's my opinion entirely. I simply think that given the ability for additional traffic to navigate beyond this point, whether they're going westbound or eastbound, regardless of how enticing we make that route. And from what I heard, it seems like the model kind of supports this, that traffic numbers here are never going to be anything like what we have, for example, on Main Street or that type of a thing, which makes me feel like having that additional right-hand turn lane there with maybe queuing for 3 or 4 vehicles is going to be sufficient forever in inducing more traffic to the intersection than what this current design would accommodate. I think creates a lot of other problems for us. You know, you can look in either direction at those intersections then, and they start to fail if there's more, you know, coming via these different routes that work their way that way. So I think you have to kind of back into what that build out design should be for a situation like this. And I think you also do have to consider what the existing land uses are. They're not going to change overnight, you know, along the corridor like what John and Mike talked about.
These guys, sorry, you were gonna, go ahead. Quick Wax purchased or in the process of purchasing this property, is that right?
I think they've purchased it, yeah.
Purchase, we had that come before us,
And
and now they're selling the house.
with that being the case, are they adjusting where their entry is? Are they moving it down further so people have more room to?
Yeah,
They are.
The south boundary of the property.
Okay, okay, so that'll kind of clean up some of that anyways as they make that adjustment.
With what you
Yes.
said, Dave, this right lane that they're for coming into some chickens, should that be longer for that queuing?
You know, this should not be for queuing into here. This being free flow versus this, which occasionally would be restricted, I think.
Because of the signal.
Yeah.
The challenge we have too is you have to balance, you don't want it to look like, no offense, but State Street in Orem, where
Right.
it's so barren, right? And so getting the maximum number of trees, bushes, something along the street. So we had the thought of, well, why don't we just make this combo, meaning no planter the whole way, but then you have no room between the sidewalk and these cars. And it just would look pretty bad. And so like, again, what Dave says, you will have the grand opening, it's gonna queue, it's gonna be goofy, but on a general day-to-day, our hope, based on the numbers they've given us, is they wouldn't be beyond, you know, this mark here now. Yeah,
Well, and you've
you never
got,
know.
you've got 2 entries too, whereas Quick Quack, they've only got the one. You've got 2 locations that they can come in, which will reduce the queuing as well.
And if I see a queue that's this long, you know, you come park and go in maybe, but if we got rid of, I think it's good to keep some level of tree and vegetation here in a 6-foot planter, like it's shown, for that reason.
My
For
second
the grand
question,
opening, I'd love to have a big combo, and then once it cools down, then put the land.
just switch it. Do we feel in for the parking, is their parking sufficient for the code for that area, for that use?
It's slightly above.
It's above?
Do you know what the red lines were from the design review?
It's minor.
The signal pole is gonna move a little bit. They have a little adjustment here for the U-turn. This is the phase before we got the U-turn adjustment. It's just a foot or so difference. Other than that, that was all the lines we had.
I sometimes get lost in the details when I read the labels, so it's obvious when I go out and inspect it.
Any other questions? All right, entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that the Slim Chickens zone change recommendation be approved based on the findings and conditions of staff as stated.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Next agenda item, we've got a preliminary plat for the Johnson subdivision. This is a master plan development on 1,000 South, 3,400 East.
Yeah, thank you. This is just north of Quiet Valley. I don't know if we want to jump to, yep, this is great. So here's Highway 6, coming down towards the mouth of the canyon, 3,400 East. Turns off here. We're looking at this north portion right here. Quiet Valley that you've discussed in the past is here. Swift Creek development is here. So Johnson is just to the east of that. This property is already zoned R115. So if you remember many discussions we've had over the probably last few years or so, as far as this upper bench, east bench area being what the city council kind of envisions as an area for larger lots. And so we do have it already zoned R115, as well as the Swift Creek development, which is also a master plan development. And that basically gives them the opportunity to be a little flexible as far as their lot sizes and widths, while not exceeding the base density that's allowed per the zone. So if they've got angles or they've got a tough layout, that gives them some flexibility. And so Jackson, our intern, did run some numbers. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but for this, there's 53 lots, and the average lot size is just over 16,000 square feet. So they are rather large lots. That's kind of fulfilling what the city council had in mind. We're looking at a parcel that's just over 25 acres. As I mentioned, there's 53 lots proposed. It does have a few existing uses on it, and we'll jump into those as we kind of look at the conditions. The DRC did take the opportunity to review this and provide you with a recommendation as well as some conditions. Their recommendation is approval of the preliminary plat. And as a master plan development, your action tonight would also be to make a recommendation to the city council. So being a master plan development, the land use authority is the city council. With this one where it's larger lots proposed, there's no open space or common areas or amenities of that nature. Any housing elements would be reviewed at the time of the building permit. So they would have to follow our standard requirements as far as materials on the elevations, roof pitch, square footage, things of that nature, which our building department is really good at having a handle on that as far as when they come in, what to be looking for and whatnot. We appreciate that. So the conditions, to Commissioner Todd Mitchell's earlier comment, we generally have a couple boilerplate comments that we put in, such as addressing red lines, meeting construction standards, things of those nature. So if you jump to number 3, we do have a couple existing uses on the site. You can see there's a residence, a couple outbuildings, a larger barn. These would all be removed. There is an existing cell tower here, which would remain. If we jump to the next slide, I believe. So the proposal is it would be walled in, and it would have direct access to this stub street that's heading north. And so the hope is that you'd still have a large sizable area to place a home. And as being a corner lot, it's a larger lot as well. But the DRC did make the recommendation there. You see number 3, that be enclosed with a 6-foot masonry wall with a site obscuring gate. And then obviously there'd be its own driveway provided, excuse me. And then the other condition is just, you can see this tail spur right here. Along the railroad tracks, there is a dedication requirement for the future expansion. I believe it's going dual rails. And so anything of that nature would be looked at, and any required dedication would be needed. Pretty straightforward. Staff is excited to see this come in. They did coordinate with the development to the south as far as connecting here. And then I believe we've got a alignment as well to the property to the west.
So will they need the development to the south to be complete in order to be able to finish out all of their phases? Because they'd only have the one access to the north.
Yeah, it really depends on timing. The development to the south, this is their first and second phase. So depending who starts first, I would assume it's the one to the south, since there's a lot of utility work in the area. And so they're going to need to coordinate that so both projects can move forward. But in the chance that this project were to move first, we do limit on a temporary single access, I believe it's 50 units. If it was a permanent single access, we'd limit it at 35. And so they would just need to coordinate with staff as far as their phasing plan. There is a phasing plan that's been provided, and so we would just have to make adjustments to that.
The cell tower, who owns the property that cell tower will sit on?
It would be the lot 6, and so that would be potential revenue to that lot owner.
It's like an ADU, I think.
I was wondering, because most of them are leased out, right? The properties
Yeah.
are leased out, so the property owner of lot 6
Yeah.
would lease out that cell tower. Interesting.
Any other questions for staff?
And then the railroad expansion, is that with the hope and expectation that in the future, the other railroad that swings to the west will be going away?
Yes.
Is that why we're planning for that?
Yeah.
We probably have, I'm gonna guess, a third to half of the property, like through, like it goes through Legacy Farms, you have Maple Park Estates, and Quiet Valley will have already done it, these guys will do it, so we're getting
So
so
we're
ready
already
to have most of it,
Okay.
half or more, 60% of it tied up, so that's good.
Okay, perfect.
This property that's underneath the power lines, is DR Horton or this development, are they gonna do the parks like they've done in Legacy Farms, or?
It's more of a natural, I'm looking at Dave, he's probably checking the Yankee score. They're losing 7-0.
Natural weeds and sage.
Tag game, sorry. I believe that's a parcel that DR Horton is trying to purchase, or do they already have it under contract?
They're trying to purchase it. They're not going to be able to purchase all of it.
So we're talking about this area right
A
here.
little bit frustrating, but yes, they in fact just last week were. Whatever it's worth looking over here.
Yeah.
They were putting a purchase offer together to give to Rocky Mountain Power after Rocky Mountain Power went through a process to publicly present the property for sale. D.R. Horton is in first position to purchase it if they can get things worked out with Rocky Mountain Power. So, in fact, the preliminary plat that was approved for Quiet Valley includes that with, I think, a total of 4 or 6 units, something like that, in it. So I think that's just going to be a matter of time.
But to answer your question, so further north, there's more improvements on the corridor.
Within Quiet Valley, the decision was made that the city trail would end at 3400 East, and then they would have community trail networks throughout. And so instead of utilizing the corridor as part of the trail network, and Rocky Mountain Power had some ideas as far as what they would allow down here. And there's more than just Rocky Mountain Power that goes east-west. SE, or what's the name of the company over here? The
The Century Tailwater Pipeline, or the power,
Power.
SCSD,
Rocky
Rocky Mountain
Mountain.
Power.
I thought there was another consortium, but, so this is actually gonna be more native grasses. They have the ability to contour it. They can put a trail through it. But I believe they weren't allowed to put trees and structures, obviously. And I don't even think they were allowed to put hardscape, like the parking and turnarounds.
They can with easements and things like that, so that's another part
Yeah.
of it.
So they had to secure some easements for the roads that cross here and one here. But largely it's gonna be native grasses that they'll put in after they do the final contouring and whatnot.
Anything else? This being a preliminary plat, this isn't a recommendation, this is an approval, is that, or am I?
Well, this would be,
wrong?
this is
It's a
a recommendation,
recommendation.
but it's also master plan
Oh,
development.
okay. So it is a
Your whole
recommendation.
plan would be to make a recommendation to the city council.
Entertain a motion?
I am the applicant.
Oh, awesome. Is there anything you want to add?
No, the
What's been
presentation was
said?
good, but I am happy to answer any questions if you guys have any for me. Randy Smith with Fieldstone.
I'll just say I appreciate the lot sizes. I know
Yeah,
that
the
was,
homeowners are gonna appreciate them too.
yeah, I know that was an adjustment to what initially some of the things that we saw, but we really appreciate it. We really do. It's gonna be a nice subdivision.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So thank you.
The one applicant that shows up, we don't have a question for.
I know.
I know. You guys stopped asking if the applicants were here. Do you want me to answer questions on the other ones? or- All right, no, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend that, the approval of the Johnson subdivision and master plan.
Got a motion?
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda, annexation. This is Utah West. This is 119 acres.
Before Brian gets started on that,
Yeah.
when we have these turned in, can we make sure they're legible? I can't, as I review these, I can't, even though I blow them up, the size of the lots and that,
Maybe include the actual PDFs.
yeah, isn't
We,
legible.
I think we usually do. Did I miss it on this one on board docs?
Often they are, but as I zoom these
Yeah,
in,
you
just
can't
check
zoom
out
in
the
at all.
lot sizes.
Yeah,
It's-
what happens is we take the PDF, convert it to a JPEG, insert it in Word, save it as a PDF. Every
You
time we
also
do
need
that,
JPEGs.
every time we do that, the quality goes down. So if you go into board docs, usually, and I,
We can take a minute after the
yeah, usually we'll attach it.
That's what I was in, I'm in board now.
No, what I'm saying is usually I'll attach the actual civil plans as a separate document, so then they're crisp and clear. I'll make sure to do that in the future. With DRC, I usually get it right, but sorry, I apologize.
Wish we could get sent to you.
I'll make sure to do that for you. This one, hopefully, it's somewhat clear. If we want to jump to the interactive map, please, Mike. So this is a requested annexation, and I am happy to say that the applicants are here tonight, and they're excited to answer any questions that you may have. I hope I don't slaughter it, but this is generally the area, if you could zoom in one click. Maybe another. All right. I was hoping the parcel lines would pop, but they're not. Roughly follows this way, and it comes up and attaches to the existing city boundary here. Just over 119 acres. Currently, obviously, outside of city limits, but it is within our annexation policy plan. And so as we look at property, when it comes to growth of the city, most of that is done by request by the property owners. We do have an annexation policy plan where we've identified areas that we anticipate annexing into the city in the future. This falls within that. As such, we do have our general plan for the area. It's largely industrial. What the applicant is looking for is the ability to annex into the city through some coordination with adjoining property owners, provide access and utilities to the area, and then develop it. The DRC did look at this and did provide the recommendation for you tonight. They recommended approval, and they specifically identified the I-1 zone. And then there are findings and conditions that are included in your report. And so some of the things that we look at, as mentioned, is that within our annexation policy boundary, do we have a general plan designation for it? And then we also have what's called a growth boundary. Those are areas that we feel relatively quickly we could provide services and utilities to. And so even though this does border the city, there are some challenges as far as looping water lines, improving access, roads, things of that nature. And so jumping to the conditions, you'll see why those are kind of important. Number one, when you annex property, some of the things that we look out for, and state code kind of gives us guidance on it, is are we creating or leaving any islands or peninsulas? And so with the current proposal, you would kind of start to create a peninsula here. And so the applicant, I'll let them speak to it, has been in touch with Utah County. And so hence the condition number one, coordinating with Utah County and getting any approval needed. Number two is that the property be zoned I-1. And number three is that request that the applicant enter into an annexation agreement with Spanish Fork City. And that would specifically address infrastructure requirements and any SESD related buyouts from the annexation. So it would kind of spell out what would need to take place in order for the property to be developed. Once we annex it in and assign a zoning such as I-1, there could be the expectation that somebody could then submit a site plan and start development right away. And so the city felt that there were a few items that needed to be spelled out as far as improvements and where that needs to take place. Any questions for staff? Otherwise, I'd love to turn some time over to the applicant, and then we will take any other comments at that point.
Is this public hearing? Do we want to?
We are required to hold the public hearing at the city council, but you're more than welcome to take any public comments tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Who wants to address? We'll talk about the annexation.
Good evening. My name is John Jensen. I am one of the applicants. I initially filed, and my colleagues here joined us and made it a little larger annexation as you see it tonight. There's a little bit of a story with this. Originally, when the city began acquiring the easements for the sewer that go through our subject property, I noticed there was a handful of homes there, all south of us and to the kind of, more or less to the south of us. So I went to Dave and I said, we really should do residential. And he said, unfortunately, that's not probably going to work. And I said, well, come on, what about all these houses here? We actually have a former family member of my colleague here that used to live there with the pond. So we have a little bit of history here. And the city's general plan, as well as annexation policy, slates all of this to be industrial. And I said, well, that's kind of sad, because some of those people have nice homes. He goes, well, unfortunately, there's some really heavy industrial, not zoning-wise, but just in type of use, going to be around this. And the more I learned, the more we worked, it was very obvious that Wasatch Pallet was coming, the meat processing plant was coming. We have, metal just south of those pieces. And I know a few things about residential around airports. Generally speaking, houses kill airports. I'm not saying that's the reason Spanish Fork wants this all industrial, but I know there's a lot of motivation to keep it that way. So we're here basically embracing the city's desire to do industrial. We met with some fairly influential economic development team members from the state of Utah. They would like to bring in one of their, contacts. We've met with them already. Dave has been looped in to some of those conversations. They would like to bring in more than $100 million worth of infrastructure for their property, the subject property. Not on all of it, just on the piece that's more or less in the center of it. They want to bring in 300 jobs. They have generally a desirable business. I would think hopefully the city would be happy with it. Average salary or wages are 53,000. That's pretty good. So while that subject that's not necessarily our application tonight, is for the site plan, the idea of this being industrial is, I think, right on target with what the city was looking for. There is need for infrastructure like roads, water looping, power, all excited. I think those are wonderful. We look forward to helping bring those to the area. In addition to that, when I saw those houses near our subject property, we went to the PLATs, the original owners. You met the new owner tonight. We begged them to sell to us. We said, anyone who buys this that's not an industrial developer may not be very happy. Now the neighbors may be just fine. I don't know. I personally would be probably a little frustrated. And unfortunately, the PLATs didn't sell to us, and that's okay. It's life. And so today we have some residential neighbors, and we look forward to moving through the annexation process to achieve the conditions that the city would like. Any questions for me? Oh, we are planning to mirror the rail spur that Wasatch Pallet has. We already have substantial progress with Union Pacific. That would ultimately go up along the subject property and into the annex.
Show us with the pointer in there.
Oh, that was a pen. So here's your rail line, right? And Wasatch Pallet's spur goes like this, and ours would go like this, up in this. Our annexation is up here, if that makes any sense. This employer, this industrial company requires rail.
How does the rail work with the property that's not part of your development?
It's county property. It's like building a road. The rail doesn't necessarily have conditions of, use. It's like saying I want a driveway. I can drive it. I can build a driveway. I can build a rail. I can build a road. And the county has their requirements.
So the county owns that property? Or it's county property?
It's in the county, and we're trying to annex the subject property, which
North
is
of that,
these
right?
pieces all up here
So that
into the city.
property's owned by the Obergs,
Mhm.
looks like. What have you heard from them as far as a rail line going through their property?
I have the contract to purchase their property and fully intend to develop it in industrial and annex it into the city.
But it's not currently part of the annexation because you've not finalized that purchase, is that right?
It's unfortunately more technical than that. The county and the city do not like to make islands and peninsulas, right? And by annexing this piece right here,
Yeah.
it would force an island in all this, right? And so ultimately the county is going to maintain their regulatory authority there, right? And we're meeting with the county tomorrow with Spanish Fork City to combine to talk about this piece and potentially anything south of it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. What can you tell me about these properties?
You know the Hallam's, correct?
I do, yeah.
They don't want anything to do with Spanish Fork City. Violently, they don't. He was very clear about that. Unfortunately, that's his mom, I think. The Yudes, I think Youd, something like that is right here. They ultimately feel the same way as Mr. Hallam.
So Rosalie still owns that property.
And the Johnsons are pretty content. We've talked to them. We asked them to annex all this. But because of the Hallam's attitude, they all kind of followed suit, which is fine. I mean, it's not the end of the world.
What about on this other side here?
Right, this is part of my colleague's assemblage. It's not part, this is, I think, part of the annexation up here. But this down here, Mr. Simpson might be able to address that if he may have information on that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So our intent is to annex the Oberg piece, the 15 acres right here. Unfortunately, Spanish Fork City is not interested in annexing that in currently. That could change, and conversations near term hopefully will provide more, information regarding that. I think it would be better if it was annexed into the city, but
Yeah, I can understand why it's.
there are some conditions that allow for islands and peninsulas to be created, and it does require the coordinated efforts between the city and the county to allow for that. Generally, they just both have to agree that it's being created. It may be more technical than that. Generally, both parties try to stay away from that, if that makes sense.
So I think an island is pretty easy to define, but how do you define a peninsula? How is bringing this in not creating, how is that not a peninsula, I guess is my question.
No, it is a
It is a
peninsula. Hence, condition number 1. And John, if you don't mind speaking to any comments you've had from the county as far as their review.
Right. Currently, the county has given their blessing to allow that kind of peninsula, meaning it's doing this, right, incorporating that. That's not part of our annexation, but if that were to happen, you have this little tiny thing, and then it's like for sure a peninsula, right? It's like so broad, it's so obvious. Having this small leg right here, it's more of a addition to the property of the city here than it is, otherwise. But generally speaking, the county is, open to this current assemblage, if that makes sense.
This to this is not that much different in my mind as far as, and the county, obviously, the
Yeah.
county has their say, but that doesn't change much of a view of a peninsula. I mean, you've still got the same amount
Yeah.
of property on the other side.
I would say philosophically, the county wants property into the city. That is contiguous to the border, part of the policy annexation maps, generally can be served with services. The county wants that to happen.
Okay.
Cities are generally the one resisting. Cities are saying, I don't know if we're ready to bring you in yet. This is the reverse. Generally speaking, the county would say, state law, requires these contingencies of peninsulas and islands. They would normally say, take it, go, rock and roll. But in this case, they're just trying to help mitigate services, fire, sheriff, stuff like that. Tyler, you had a thought?
Legal counsel for applicant. So I just was going to hit on that policy point. It really comes down to health, safety, welfare of the folks here and ability to serve the public. And so John just barely, I was like, hey, John, make sure you say it. And he just barely said what I wanted to say. My name's Tyler Dow. It's about serving the public here in this area and having any confusion about services in the area. So that's part of the reason the policy exists on no islands and things like that. And it's not like this plague. It's just a policy decision, and that's why your code is set up to allow for it to happen as long as both the city and the county agree to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anything that maybe we missed or talked about the county a little bit? Brandon.
John, one thing, the county did release an agricultural easement on our property last Wednesday.
What does that mean?
Do you want to come to the mic so they can hear you?
Yeah, Dave Simpson, we had to apply for, let's see, where's the, okay, they're on 800 West, the property that lies west of there has an agricultural easement that was put on by the county. Since our application was in, they released that easement off of this property so that it could go into the annexation.
Which means they're cooperating with this.
Right. And that was last Wednesday. And did I send you the letter?
You did, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Legal again.
Okay.
So basically,
What do you
the
mean,
county.
Dennis?
Yeah, no, it's great. He did great. The county's basically, somebody in the past went to the county and said, let's keep this ag forever. And let's put an easement across it to prevent development. And the city has a general annexation policy map that says this should be industrial. And this goes back to what John was just saying. Counties want to see cities do development, not the reverse. Right? Sorry, I didn't mean, so basically, as a development group, we went in and said to the county, this will impede the city's desire to make this area industrial. So we release that easement, and the city, or excuse me, the county has agreed to do that.
Have agreed to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good info. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, going back then to their topic of public safety and everything else, with this kind of being on the outskirts of what will be Spanish Fork, are there any concerns from the city on being able to service this area?
Yeah, really, really big concerns. So I'll start with it that way. But yet, concerns like the ones that I'll describe in a minute, they only get addressed by development. I mean, that really is what gets facilities to an area like this that allows for the city to provide services that today don't exist or otherwise, would be difficult to provide. And a big part, I guess, I think of the conversation that we're having about the boundary of the proposed annexation and different things like that. And incidentally, I really, really appreciate Mr. Jensen's description of conversations that I've been having with the county and policy, statute, all of those different types of things. I think he's spot on in how he's represented things. And maybe for, the benefit of you guys, if you track some things going back a few years, not that far in the past, we would have been very, very resistant to an annexation with a boundary that is maybe as gerrymandered as what we're seeing here tonight. I think, frankly, we'll probably see more of that in the future, and that's largely because of a change that was made to Utah Code, I don't remember exactly when, 3-4 years ago, something like that, that substantially hamstrung cities' ability to dictate the configuration of annexations, I guess is how I'd put it. It's probably not the best way to describe it, but there was a tool that existed previously that was taken away, and I think with that being the case, cities and counties now are going to have to work through issues like this with boundaries that are far from ideal. So again, the idea that we want logical boundaries, because that is generally I think the framework by which services are provided most effectively, most efficiently, and so forth. That's really what it is about, I think. Just having some logic applied when that boundary between city and county is created. So that's part of what we've discussed with the applicant. And we know the Hallam's and suspect that others may have concerns about being annexed. We'll maybe hear about that too. So we certainly try to be sensitive to that. But that all being maybe set aside relative to what was described, the idea that some part of this annexation is going to be put to use industrially or otherwise. Currently, there is not a good way to get to the annexation area. There is not a good vehicular route to get there. In my mind, that's issue number one. I think the provision of utilities probably is much more simple than that, than constructing probably roads. I'd probably say there needs to be more than one significantly upgraded route to the property to be able to do, again, what Mr. Jensen described. But that being said, I feel like annexing the property really is the first step towards getting somebody queued up to where our transportation master plan is put into play, roads get built, and then properties develop and that type of a thing. To that end, I believe there are other developers in the area also that are looking at pretty significant opportunities to construct facilities that likewise would need new roads, upgraded roads, and that type of a thing. So that ties into conversations that we've had with John and others about the idea of having an annexation agreement in place so that even if the property is zoned industrial, upon annexation, which is what staff's recommending, is not only that the property be annexed, but that it be zoned industrial now, that there would need to be specific criteria met before the city would approve any particular plan to develop the property. And again, I'll keep going back to roads. I think that probably is the biggest, maybe the most expensive issue to address. This frankly, I think, just speaking for myself, kind of caught me off guard. There are other areas in the community that if you'd asked me a few years ago, I absolutely would have, I think, predicted accurately that we'd be seeing a lot of development interest in. Didn't really see it coming here, frankly. Not that that matters or means anything. We've still gone through a process to identify what would need to happen, I think, for the area to be able to be supported, should it develop. Because this came up, talking about things like access to rail, that's highly desirable. And it's becoming more and more rare all the time. So sites that have that access, I think that absolutely moves them up, in terms of how attractive they are to users at the end of the day and that sort of a thing. For better or worse, Spanish Fork City has long worked to attract capital investment, employment, and different things like that. So the idea that we would be supportive of an annexation like this, I think, is just sort of the nature of how we've operated as staff for a long time. That being said, still there are things that need to be worked out before I think anybody on staff would say we're ready to see construction occur out there.
How do I say this? Let's talk about the rail line. What are the possibilities does it have to be where you've designated, which I think you said is going to be along this road? Are you purchasing this property as well?
No.
You're just purchasing this field?
That's not a road, that's my driveway.
Okay. So it would obviously be on your property that you purchased, but adjacent. Personally, if I'm a property owner and I bought this home, this was my dream home,
Yeah.
I'd be ticked
Yeah.
if I were to find out that somebody's putting a railroad across the street from me.
Part of the problem is we sent an email, we called, we texted the PLATs and said, you have to tell the buyers that there is an industrial developer coming.
So you guys
Either way, we have the information that we sent. Regardless of what the PLAT said, we have the information. And we begged them because I said, whoever buys this property will find themselves in a really tough situation. One of the tough situations, the city has said they want all that ground to be industrial. That's what the city has said. Go to the general plan, you can see it.
Planned for, yeah.
Then on top of that, you have Wasatch Pallet, you have a meat processor, you have other development going on around it. It's not going to be residential ever. So that's the second big problem. The momentum has even gone that way. In addition to that, the spurs take a big giant radius. These cars don't turn on a dime. If you look at Wasatch Pallet's curve, it's very broad, right? And then on top of that, if you want to move it further away, who's going to compensate for the ground that you can't get over, right? What are we going to put on the far side between the rail side and a residential owner? So I embrace the idea of them staying. I embrace it. If they want to stay, they can stay. I actually hope they do, because I think ultimately if I invested money in that property, it's beautiful. If you've been out there, it's amazing. It's a cool place. Unfortunately, their neighbors are all going to be industrial, all of them. Whether that's today or tomorrow, it's just, that's where the momentum's going. It's frustrating, in my opinion. So our motive is not to say, oh, residential owners nearby who are in a master planned or a general planned industrial area, let's try to make it so it's not going to be loud and noisy and not industrial. That's too late. The city's already made the general plan, and unfortunately the PLATs just bought it, or not PLATs, but the Oplin Ops just bought it, just barely bought it, and it's like that close. But again, I don't blame anybody for how it went. It went the way it went, and our goal now is to attract industrial uses, not to try to mitigate residential uses. That's why I went to Dave and said, this needs to be residential, because the Platts would have loved this have stayed. And they bailed because of the industrial use. That's why they bailed. They knew this was coming, and that's why they sold.
That's not true.
That's what they told me, and I talked to them.
Hold up.
But I talked to them.
I'm gonna give
Right.
you guys some time to talk. I'll let you address and say whatever. We'll give you as much time as you feel like you need, but let.
I think the problem is you have a seller that sold to a buyer, and the sellers don't want to be looked at as guilty, and I don't blame them. I don't think we should get in the middle of any transaction. The Oplin ops are now here going, holy cow, what's going on right now? This is terrible. We just bought this heaven. And now we have this moment that we're clashing, right? Development and existing uses are now clashing. I mean, this is going to happen on and on and on throughout the development of Spanish Fork. So I'm not here to say that they don't have concerns or not frustrated or whatever the story is. I'm not here to discount any of that. I don't believe in that. But I do believe that the city has made it crystal clear they want this all industrial. Crystal clear.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned this property right here, right? Who's that? Do you guys have
I
that?
haven't mentioned it. I'm just saying that exists. That is actually a gap in the platting. It's not real.
Because your guys' line is here, right
Put a
here.
flag up on it.
No, there is probably a true connection right here and right here, but when you have these gaps, because they might have surveyed from two different
But
points
your
of view.
annexation line is here, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Sorry, Tyler. You probably wanted to keep us from saying something bad.
No, you did fine. So from an evidentiary perspective, we can submit emails, texts, and whatnot to the previous owners. And that would be something that would be sufficient at the county, or excuse me, the city decision level, right? Is a quasi-governmental or quasi-judicial action for them to annex this in. So we can support the fact that the previous owners were communicated with, in addition to it being part of your public plan, right? So it's unfortunate that the real estate agents or whomever didn't communicate properly. And we really do feel badly that you're in the situation. This plan here is one that's being circulated not just to local industrial users. EDC Utah, which is responsible for recruiting businesses to come to the state, is very heavily involved in seeing Spanish Fork be successful. The county is very interested in this area being successful as a home for industrial workers and work in the state. So when John talks about $100 million and you have folks on your staff saying we need infrastructure to make this work, there are very large companies that are interested in coming here to bring jobs, to bring workers and factory, industrial type work here, right? So we just, as John said, we originally said it would be a lot easier and better to do homes. And we were told and we agreed. That's not what your plan was. And so we're just responding to your plan and we
Totally understand that.
on that. So, again, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions?
Not right now. Not right now. You guys want to?
I don't have anything else to say, but.
I would just love your thoughts, any input that you guys have, concerns. Obviously, you're here because you've got concerns.
Right. So I don't believe the Platts knew about this development when they sold to us because they disclosed a lot of this other information about what was happening with Wasatch Pallet, as well as the slaughterhouse was going in next door. They disclosed all of that. We did contact Dr. Platt a couple of days ago and asked him about what was happening with the cornfield across our field, or in my front yard, and he said that he had talked to the Obergs some 6 years ago, and the Obergs had no interest in selling at all. So I don't believe that they are truly under contract with them. I believe it's a proposed area, but I don't believe that I don't think the Obergs have any interest in selling. And I tried to contact the Obergs as well, and I don't.
If that's the case, and they're not going to sell it, then I don't think you can put a rail line through. And
right.
so
I don't think
right.
it's.
So, but
yeah, they have no interest.
That's really not.
That's that's neither here nor there.
That's not for us to.
But yeah, I don't believe that the Platts knew about that. They said they didn't, and I believe them. The other concern we have is that if they do develop the cornfield across from us, then we would be landlocked in, and we would have no access but only the private railroad. So we might ask the city to consider maybe putting in a road at the tip right up there to 650 West.
Either going west or going north,
Some way.
Yeah,
because
either
the-
going west or north, and so we have access. And we did talk to Shane Marshall a few days ago, and he has. Does he work for UDOT or?
He did work for you.
Yeah, and so he said that even with the railroad, that the city might be interested in improving the safety of having access to our house because that railroad is kind of dangerous. It's a private railroad. It's hard to see the rail train coming from both sides. So, and we do have rights to that lot. But as far as that development coming in and having them develop everything, like we would be like blocked in, and I think that's a safety issue. But those are our concerns.
Okay, anything else?
No, and I think if there is a rail spur,
Thank you.
I mean, if it
Would be a rail spur, we would ask for the same that Wasatch Pallet's doing with a fence and a setback and all that too. We would ask for the similar development there but that's a long ways. We'd prefer not or whatever, and it is a safety issue, and so.
Dave, with that being a city boundary lining a county boundary, does the same rules apply with industrial? They'd be required to put a wall between
Certainly.
residential?
Huh?
So,
Yes.
so that
Brought
would,
into our, into the city.
so that would take place, that would happen.
Yeah, and I think what was just described relative to improving access in the area, I mean, I'd look at it a little bit more broadly, but this is a great case in point for needing to get better access to the area, in that case, to that particular home. I know how these things come about. I don't think in the city necessarily a building permit would have been issued for a home in that situation where you have to cross railroad tracks to get to and from it, like exists right now. So certainly getting, again, just I want to speak, I guess, broadly, but better access for the Alpenops, anybody else in the area. I think that's part of an area going from nothing but agricultural uses to the types of things that we're talking about. And I think that's generally what we're thinking about as staff.
What is the city's thoughts on a railroad basically splitting, two little pockets of residential? I guess we have up here too, but just down the middle like that.
There's no way for me to answer that without sounding really cold and heartless and not sensitive. So, but it's a matter of timing, maybe, is what I would say.
But the railroad is stubbing, meaning it's gonna end right around here. So trains are gonna be slowing down, knowing that they're gonna be ending, right?
It just,
And
it's just a
anything
spur
further.
of the
It's
service.
spur, so they'll just go up and down Union Pacific like they do now, right? And then only when they come off.
But when they're coming off, they're slowing down. They're slowing down as they're coming off.
Just like when they're servicing Longview or whatever it's called now.
Kirby, or the old Kirby building, whatever it is now. Yeah.
They generally stop.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the train that stop to change direction.
Yeah, so this is the spur that goes into Longview Fiber, or whatever it's called now. And then it comes back here and connects back home.
You see PDMs over there as well.
That's my excuse today if I'm not late for work.
Train stopped you. If you get stuck here behind the train, yeah, it's kind of a long way.
Yeah, that's another issue, if there's a train there and stopped or whatever, blocking it, turn, it blocks access to.
Do you guys currently deal with that?
We haven't been there long enough to see that. That's what my concern is though, with they have to slow down, they back up or whatever, moving, blocking access. If you have an emergency or it's daughter is diabetic and if you have to get to the hospital so quick.
It's a good concern. An obvious concern. You'd need another access to the north.
Yeah, and that, I mean, obviously, first choice is no rail spur. Second choice is rail spur. We would ask for access or tie into the north. or west.
Somehow, somewhere.
Probably north because west is over the ridge.
Okay.
Tonight, though, we're not considering that option, right? So that property isn't even in this annexation. It is just
Correct.
the annexation of the property on our,
But the north is.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, I really appreciate that it came up tonight.
yeah.
Yeah, just in the spirit of, I mean, this is big. And again, it kind of caught me off guard a little bit, but this is also what happens when you put a sewer line through an area. You know, there's high demand for property like industrial property right now in Utah Valley, which I also didn't see coming, but the conversations we've had in the last 2 years, you know, equal what I had in the previous 13 years with Spanish Fork in terms of just interest in industrial property in Spanish Fork. So it's I think a matter of timing in a lot of ways.
So my thoughts are this, and obviously it's a little bit of a difficult situation for you guys being where you are. Recently moved into your home. Property, you know, the rights of the property owners on both sides need to be looked at. Because these property owners are asking to be annexed into the city, the county and the city are both in agreement of it, their property rights need to be respected. I think they have every right and every ability to do that.
Disagree with that at all.
Yeah, what we need to make sure of is access for you guys, that it doesn't become an issue somehow, and that's gonna be something that'll be discussed down the road. This is just the annexation part, but then as development takes place, we need to make sure that any concerns that you guys have and the neighboring residents, that's addressed and that's looked at and that's taken care of before any development moves forward. As far as the annexation goes, though, we've got other properties within the city and within the county where similar situations, there were individuals that want nothing to do with the city. They've got their properties, they like the way their properties are being used currently. They're concerned that development going on around them is gonna prohibit them or change the way they use their properties, but the development still took place. I don't think their properties have really changed much. They're still able to use them the way they thought they could. I think that'll be the same for you and the Halloms and everybody else in that area. You'll still be able to use your property the way you want to, as long as you live there and you want horses and you want to farm and you're in the county, you're gonna be able to do that.
What if we're annexed in the city? Would that still?
You won't be annexed unless if you as property owners want to be annexed.
Would we still have animal rights?
As long as you live in that home and you come in and annex, you'll be able to use your property for the way that it's zoned. And we would bring it in zone. I would assume, Dave, maybe we can talk.
I think everything you've said is totally correct, except conceivably there is a path whereby you could be annexed whether you consent to be annexed or not. Conceivably there is a path where that could happen. That's the only thing I wanted to, but in terms of animal rights, the short answer is yes, that would not change with annexation, so.
So if you're still here, I have a question. So let's say they were annexed, and this potentially was annexed after the purchase, and all those different things happened, and the island or peninsula, whatever it's called, was approved. Would it be required for this road to be improved along with maybe some different setbacks with this rail?
Not automatically. If this property were to develop somehow, then yes, we require at that point in time frontage to be developed. Now,
Would
this
Railspur count as development?
new question, good question. I'm not entirely sure, although as Mr. Jensen described it earlier, as more of just infrastructure and not development, that is generally how I think, tend to look at it. But I also am not sure that we would look at this as a road. And I'm not sure how you feel about this being viewed as a road versus a driveway or something like that. I think there are a lot of options. Maybe is the best way just to leave it.
Jesse's comment though revolved around access. So whatever we term anything, how is that access if it becomes an island?
How do we improve access if it's an
Sorry.
island? I think access to this home is one of the things that we start to talk about when our legal counsel has a draft agreement ready for you guys to review, hopefully on Friday. That was the target that I know he's been working towards, along with a number of other, I would say, bigger access issues for the entire area. But this is a bad situation, and I'm afraid it's about to get worse as traffic on that rail line increases, even if it's just for the pallet factory. That's a bad deal, and honestly, improving that.
It's bad to see it. It's not good. So
Yeah.
we get across, but as you get more traffic, it's going to be worse.
I'm not aware of other situations like this that we have, that will maybe be worsened with development in the area, but I think that's another thing that we need to look at as staff. Just to make sure we really have a handle on that, and that we try to get things spelled out, to be as predictable as we possibly can, with the expectations that get put in the agreement.
Is that how it currently looks?
No.
And this was 10 years ago, but you know.
Yeah, that's a really old picture.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Looking north.
Yeah.
Dave, Kevin made the comment that the rail spur wouldn't go in unless that property was owned. Is that necessarily, could that be forced through?
I think probably it could be. I don't think there's any way on earth that would happen, though.
Okay.
Another question, Dave, while you're there. So their property gets annexed. We've got general plan for this whole area industrial. When we bring a property in through annexation, we at that time zone it as well. Is that correct?
Huh?
So if their property, the Appleton House property, were to be annexed in, and they wanted to continue to keep animals and everything, would it still be zoned industrial but with the non-conforming use?
So that is the city council's decision. I don't think, however, that there's any way that staff would recommend that a property that wants some type of agricultural zoning, rural residential zoning or something like that, upon annexation, industrial zoning be forced upon them.
Okay.
So it could certainly happen that the property would be zoned industrial, but if this family wanted that property zoned some other way upon annexation, and then maybe unique thing about a couple of other zoning options is that we often use those as a kind of a holding scenario in advance of somebody wanting to develop. So if somebody doesn't want the use of a property to change, oftentimes we assign an agricultural zone, and typically the zone that we use mirrors how properties are currently zoned in Utah County. So there's really not a land use regulatory change at the time of annexation. But that's one of the things that the council decides. I also entirely believe that they're very sensitive to what property owners want. So.
In an annexation, can we stipulate providing access to given homes around the area, or is that not a part of an annexation?
This is a little unique. I don't know that we've ever been that explicit. Instead, typically we talk about maybe specific routes that need to be constructed and that sort of a thing. So I don't want to stick my neck out too far tonight because I just don't know.
That would be.
But I think,
Maybe later on, right, when they came in with their development, their subdivision plans, that would be discussed then.
That's one option, and that's really entirely what I had in mind.
Which
but-
would, as long as it conforms to the zoning, it wouldn't even come before us.
That's correct, yeah. I almost think that relative to this property, we need to look a little bit bigger picture about everything that's changing in the area, at least potentially, and some of the impacts that that's creating and how we maybe mitigate some of those impacts like access and that sort of thing, almost regardless of what happens. But at the same time, the conversations fold together really well in my mind, so. Not trying to dodge the question.
There's still a lot of unknowns that we still need to figure out.
There are a lot of ways to get necessary access, needed access to the area. Some of them are really clearly prescribed already in our transportation master plan. And some of those options are easier than others, so I don't know exactly how that comes about. But certainly I do wish that we had a draft agreement tonight to share with you guys. I think that would make the conversation a lot easier for everybody.
Because as I look at it, you know, having my house or having no access, because obviously that picture was 10 years ago, but that's not an access, especially in a medical emergency. So that's my biggest concern about that, but it sounds
that
like.
access doesn't change with what we're talking
Right,
about.
but
It's still the
that's what I'm
access
saying
is
is, I think that's the biggest concern, but with what we're talking about, the annexation makes sense. But those are things that we have to keep on the front of our mind as we go forward.
The connector road, where are you proposing how to get out of there?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Jake,
300,
we talked
right?
about 800 west,
Just master plan to show.
800 west coming down.
Yeah, for me, it's getting over to Main Street that's probably the most critical route to improve. So the north side of Clune, extending that road beyond where it currently.
1950.
Yep. And then, at least I think it is, yeah. It's 19, it's just a little bit south of 1950, yeah, because it jogs down to the south, if I have it right. But having that route extend all the way out to where this road can get built, I think that's a really important access, with the idea that there's a new interchange that's going to be constructed right here. So that seems like a fairly realistic route that would be attractive for people that are trying to get to and from the area that we're talking about tonight. What else have we talked about, Mike? I mean, coming south down to 1000 North, that's the next best second route as well. And right now, this I do not think works well. So having some other, and maybe by significantly improving that situation changes, but just given the scale that you could be dealing with 100 plus acres of industrial development there, I don't think we're just looking at one way to improve it. And things probably happen incrementally, but Mike, I don't know how to talk about that, how you view that as.
It's an A to B. We don't know how it'll go through there. Just the railroad creates a crossing issue, right? This crossing will never be improved beyond what it is. And we will never be approved for another crossing. If anything, they'd like us to remove crossings. So, I mean, our ways to get across are right here and the existing one right here. Right, and then the other one is Main Street here. So those are the 3 points to touch. And so there's really no other east-west between 1900 clear down to 1000. So that's quite a distance. And so the idea is some connection over here north of the railroad tracks so you can get across. Now, we obviously know the challenges with the property owners here. So we'll have to work that out through a development agreement or some sort that the road will go through. But when is that? How is that? But I think for now, you can work on that, north-south to 1000 North, and then the 1900.
I heard 800 West mentioned. Can you zoom out just a little bit? So this conceivably, I think, would have been a fairly good route too, to get to and from I-15 to get over here, but this, in my view, really makes that much less attractive. For obvious reasons. So now you're circumventing that closing and coming out. There are a lot of, at least a handful of different ways that I think the situation can be improved. I think it's a team effort over here, potentially involving these applicants and maybe other folks that want to do things in the area.
I have concerns of, I wish we had a full commissioner here tonight. This to go
Kind
over
of a big
this.
deal,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I know my feelings on it, to where but I value their opinions also.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a thought that keeps going through my head as we discuss this.
Yeah. I don't know that, a lot would change as far as the final decision, so I think I know what my thoughts are, and it falls on property rights. But, yeah, I would definitely love to hear their opinions as well, and get their thoughts.
Because I think there's some dialogue that we're missing with not having them here, just maybe, and maybe some things that, you know, frankly, we might be missing in the conversation.
That having been said.
Probably just a reminder, since it was a lengthy discussion, the DRC did have some recommended findings and conditions for you to consider in your motion.
I guess, my thoughts right now, I'd like to table it for another meeting.
I think I'm on the same page because of the things we've discussed. So I'll make a motion that we table this until another meeting.
Yeah, I've got a motion to table.
I'll second that.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye.
Are there any particular things that you'd like us to do maybe between now and your next meeting, and for that matter?
I think the other three are also gonna wanna talk about access, so maybe between the developers, between the city, you can try and hash out what type of, especially for their property, what type of access we're looking at or what we could do.
The draft that you said that should be around on Friday, I think will help, hopefully.
Yeah, and I assume that you guys would be open to having some more detailed conversations about what some of those things might look like. In my mind, I think that helps maybe provide level of detail that.
As far as the annexation itself, I'm in favor of it. I think it'll go through. I think we do need to have the other three commissioners to give their opinions and their votes as well, besides just three of us. We're a little shorthanded tonight on a decision as big as this, so. Okay. Moving on then to our next agenda item. Thanks, you guys. Next agenda item, also a public hearing, Title 15 amendments, and I think, go ahead, Dave. I think you had some comments on this.
Yep, this is me, and it's about 90% baked, I would say at this point. So I'm here tonight to maybe talk about it in concept, and then to request that it be continued.
Do you want to just, because you're gonna have to talk about it in concept again next time the other commissioners are here, do you want to just?
Flat out? Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I'd really mention that we're struggling to clearly define is at what point in time do we require the street trees to be installed, and who exactly is responsible for that? And I promise I'll be brief. The issue is that to require a developer to install trees in front of people's houses before they, for example, occupy a house, a new home buyer occupies the home, and therefore we have a source of watering and caring for the trees and things like that built in. We're struggling to bridge that gap, but we'll get there, and I think we'll get there by your next meeting and have some very realistic options for you guys to talk about.
That would be great.
So example, if Billstone Homes building lots of homes all at once, or a custom guy that's just selling lots, the timings are very different. So
Yeah.
having one standard that
To
would
include
shoot
both
for
of
that.
those
Okay.
situations, yeah.
It's just- that's what we've been wrestling with too, thinking about it.
And it's, there's a good model. Springville City has a really good model for this. But Springville City's much more engaged in the process of getting street trees planted than what we've talked about Spanish Fork being.
Do they have their own department that deals with that, or what do they do specifically?
Off-season, their public works department, during the winter, they plant trees. It's a good time of year to plant trees.
Parks and Rec Department.
I was told, I thought it was public,
Used to
they
be-
use some other,
Back in the day.
he knows better than me, so I'll.
It used to be the Parks and Rec, but it could be public works now.
For example,
So
like
do they-
streets department, when they're not asphalting, doing street maintenance,
Okay.
they have some time But it's the parks.
They gather the money through the year from the developers, and then at a certain time each year, they take that money and then put those trees in.
Street by street. So they do whole streets at the same time. Boom. And they do it after a certain number of homes along the street are occupied. I've struggled to find a better model. Painful to say it's Springville, right? But that is the reality, and that might be part of what we bring back as well. But that's the only hang. I think, and maybe if you guys have concerns about the goal of getting a certain type of tree planted, certain spacing and that kind of thing, in my mind, that's the easy part. It's putting it into practice that is the challenging part.
Okay, thanks, Dave. All right, next agenda item, Transportation Master Plan.
This one's pretty short and easy, in my mind anyway.
Sorry, Mike. Did we actually make a motion and we didn't, right? Okay,
No.
we need to make a motion on that last one.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll make
So,
a motion
Title
to table Title 15 amendments.
Got a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. These are trail changes. This is the old one. There's this odd configuration of a trail system. It kind of matched a road system that originally was in our master plan, since removed, and just kept this one here. At some point, if there is an inkling that MAG or another regional body wants this road to be, built this way versus up to the current signal, we'll adjust at that point. But currently their plan reflects what you see over here. So we thought it'd be good to match that. And I don't see a point of having this circular deal here. So that's one. Second one, this is Quiet Valley, looking north. The old one had either a tunnel or an overpass for a trail to connect to Mapleton. We don't think that's a great idea financially or just connectivity wise. So we took that out. This is the Swift Creek area. This goes down into a kind of a hole, we'll call it. And then this road is 15, 20 feet higher than the field next to it. So just buildability, or constructability, not buildability. We thought it'd be better to come along the road that would be built, and then connect onto the trail system on 3400. This is the county address anyway, 3400 East. And then as you keep coming, this comes along the highway. There's storage units here, there's railroad tracks. We just don't feel like this is a feasible route. Not a very pleasing route either. Really busy, you have a high-speed crossing right here, no tunnel. So we thought if we got rid of this, and instead, these are the Canyon Breeze. So the road and the signal is going to move from this spot over to this spot. So let's put the crossing at a signal that comes across and then down this hill and then connects to the river trail directly. So lots more trail off of busy roads. Let's cross an actual light and get them, onto a more pleasing path more quickly. It'll be pretty good here and pretty good here. So this is the minimal route versus the loop. So that's, DRC thought that was kind of the best route there.
The road, once the light moves, this would be Canyon Road where it connects into 6.
Yeah, we can run over here real quick.
So that's not going to be an access to 6 anymore, right?
This will be a cul-de-sac.
Right.
Yep,
So much less traffic.
correct.
Maybe not connecting, alternate light with the trail, when the trail crosses.
Yep, so the trail would come, follow the road here, cross the road somehow right there, and then come down that way.
From that light up on Canyon Road, or where that connects up is a dead end basically. It's
Correct.
cul-de-sac.
It would just service
It's
these
just that community there,
folks here.
people going down to the
River Bottoms Road here.
Road.
And then our existing trail
Yeah,
is,
that's great.
is right here. So
Looks good.
that's it.
Is that it for that one?
We'll be a little more consistent in bringing smaller ones like this than saving them up for long ones that bore everyone. So That's what we have this time. We'll have another one probably next time.
Love it. All right, it's public hearing, so let's move into public hearing for changes to the transportation master plan. Anybody want to address this issue? Okay, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing, and I would entertain a motion.
Mike, thanks for making it shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really.
just more constant.
I'll make a motion that we recommend the changes to the transportation master plan.
Got a motion?
Second?
Got a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Anything else that needs to come up tonight? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Something every week. Just take care of my road, will you?
You
Mike
betcha.
Todd, I haven't met you.
There you go.
Are you ready to finish Spanish?
Since Brigham sent us here, yeah.